I'm Lillian, I'm 28 years old, and right now, I'm standing in the center of our family's estate garden while 50 of my closest relatives stare at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. My older brother, Arthur, just finished announcing to everyone that I'm a predator who manipulated our dying father into signing over the family legacy, all while he brandishes a forged document he claims is the true inheritance. The air is thick with judgment. My aunts are already whispering about calling the police to have me removed from my own property. Arthur has a smug, triumphant grin on his face, certain he's finally destroyed my reputation in front of the entire bloodline. But what he doesn't realize is that I've been playing a much more disciplined game. Before he can take another step toward the podium to claim his victory, I reach into my jacket. "You really should have checked the private vault, Arthur," I say, my voice cold and steady as I pull out the original notarized will. Everything he's built today is about to turn to ash. The silence that follows my announcement is deafening. I can see the gears turning in Arthur's head, his smug expression flickering for just a fraction of a second before he masks it with a look of feigned outrage. He looks at the relatives, then back at me, his chest puffing out as he prepares to double down on his lie. My cousins are frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, caught between the drama of a public execution and the sudden chilling shift in the atmosphere. But before I let the hammer fall, before I show this entire family exactly what Arthur is capable of, I need to know who is actually standing with me. If you've ever been the one person in your family who was treated like an outsider while the golden child got away with everything, I want you to hit that like button and subscribe right now. It's more than just a click. It's a way of saying you won't let the manipulators win. And do me a favor, drop your location in the comments below. I want to see where in the world our community is watching from as we take back the narrative. Stick with me, because to understand how we got to this garden, and why my brother thought he could destroy me in front of 50 people, we have to go back to the very beginning. We have to go back to the years of silence, the hidden bank accounts, and the moment I realized that being the good daughter was never going to be enough to survive this family. Stay tuned, because the Betrayal story is just getting started. Section 3. The Toxic Baseline, 2:30 to 10 o'clock. To understand why my brother felt so comfortable standing on that podium lying to our entire lineage, you have to understand the dynamic of the house we grew up in. In our family, there was a very clear unspoken law. Arthur was the golden child, and I was the scapegoat. Growing up, the favoritism wasn't just a feeling. It was a constant, suffocating reality that dictated every aspect of our lives. Arthur was 4 years older, the firstborn son, and in my parents' eyes he could do no wrong. If he crashed the family car, it was because the other driver was reckless. If he failed a semester of college, it was because the professors didn't understand his genius. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who was expected to be seen and not heard, the one who quietly maintained a 4.0 GPA and worked a part-time job, yet still found myself being criticized for the way I folded the laundry or the tone of my voice when I asked for help with my tuition. I remember one specific Thanksgiving when I was 19. I had worked 60 hours that week at a local cafe to save up for my textbooks. Arthur, who was 23 and living at home rent-free, had just been fired from another executive internship for showing up late. During dinner, my father announced he was buying Arthur a brand new luxury SUV to boost his confidence for his next job search. When I tentatively asked if I could have some help with my $400 biology lab fee, the table went silent. My mother looked at me with genuine disappointment and said, "Lillian, don't be so greedy. You know your brother is going through a hard time. Why are you always trying to take away his moment?" That was the baseline. A world where Arthur's failures were treated as tragedies requiring financial rescue, and my successes were treated as obligations that didn't deserve a second thought. The microaggressions only intensified as we got older. When our father's health began to decline, Arthur was never there. He was too busy with his social life or his latest failed business venture. I was the one who moved back into the estate, the one who sat by my father's bed, managed his medications and held his hand through the long nights of his final months. Yet, whenever our extended relatives visited, Arthur would swoop in for 10 minutes, take a photo with Dad, and post it online with a caption about family loyalty. Our aunts and uncles would fawn over him, praising him for being such a devoted son, while I was relegated to the kitchen, preparing the meals and cleaning up after everyone. Arthur began to view the estate not as a home, but as a prize he was entitled to simply by existing. He would walk through the halls pointing at paintings and furniture, openly discussing how much he could get for them at auction. He didn't care about the legacy or the history, he only cared about the payout. He assumed that because he was the golden child, the path to the inheritance was already paved in gold for him. He had no idea that for the first time in my life, I was no longer playing the role of the silent scapegoat. I was watching, I was documenting, and I was preparing for the moment the mask would finally have to come off. The atmosphere in that house during my father's final days wasn't one of mourning. It was a cold, calculated siege. While I was in the room holding my father's hand, listening to his labored breathing and making sure his pain medication was administered on the dot, Arthur was in the study with his associates, loudly discussing property valuations. The disrespect was palpable, but the true breaking point, the moment the golden child mask slipped to reveal the monster underneath, happened on a Tuesday night that I will never forget. A massive storm had rolled in, the kind that rattled the window panes of the estate. I had been awake for nearly 48 hours, exhausted to my core from the physical and emotional toll of being Dad's sole caregiver. I went to the kitchen to make a pot of coffee, and that's when I found Arthur. He wasn't alone, he had a man with him I didn't recognize, a sleek, shifty-looking guy with a briefcase. Arthur didn't even look up as I entered. He just gestured toward me and said to the man, "And that's the help. Don't worry about her, she'll be gone by the end of the week." I froze. "Arthur, what are you talking about?" He finally turned to me, his eyes devoid of any empathy. "Lillian, let's be realistic. You've played your part. You've been the dutiful little daughter and Dad appreciated it, I'm sure. But this estate needs a legacy, not a babysitter. I've already contacted a moving crew. They'll be here 48 hours after the funeral to clear out your things. This is my home," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. "I have lived here, worked here, and kept this family together while you were out blowing Dad's money." Arthur laughed, a sharp, condescending sound that echoed through the empty house. "You were the scapegoat, Lillian. That was your job. You were meant to serve the family, not inherit it. Dad and I had a talk while you were out running errands. He realized that leaving anything to someone as unstable as you would be a mistake. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. It was the key to the front gate. Actually," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss, "I think it's better if you leave now. You're disturbing Dad's peace with your emotional outbursts." Before I could process what was happening, Arthur grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the mudroom. He pushed me out into the pouring rain without a coat, without my purse, and certainly without a goodbye to my dying father. I heard the heavy deadbolt click into place. I stood there in the mud, soaked to the bone, screaming for him to open the door, but the only response was the house lights flicking off one by one, leaving me in total darkness. I spent that night shivering in my car, parked at the end of the driveway, watching the house through the blur of my windshield. That was the moment the victim-to-victor arc truly began. I realized that being the good daughter was a death sentence in this family. As the sun began to rise over the estate, I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. I realized I had to walk away. Not because I was defeated, but because I needed to build a fortress that Arthur could never breach. I put the car in gear and drove away without looking back, knowing that the next time I stepped onto that property, I wouldn't be the girl in the rain. I would be the storm. I didn't go to the funeral. I knew that if I showed up, I would just be playing into the role Arthur had scripted for me, the unstable, grieving sister that the family needed to pity and then forget. Instead, I took the $3,000 I had managed to squirrel away in a private account and moved 300 miles away to a city where the name Lillian carried no baggage and no expectations. The first 6 months were a blur of survival. I worked 3 different jobs: waitressing at a 24-hour diner, transcribing legal documents at night, and spent every spare second teaching myself the intricacies of digital asset management and luxury brand photography. I lived in a studio apartment so small I could reach the stove from my bed, but for the first time in my life, there was no one there to tell me I was a disappointment. While Arthur was busy playing Lord of the Manor, throwing lavish parties at the estate and telling our relatives that I had suffered a breakdown and run off to join a cult, I was building a digital empire in total silence. I realized that in the modern world, information and aesthetics are the ultimate currency. I started a consulting firm that specialized in invisible wealth management, helping high-net-worth individuals curate their public images while keeping their actual assets private. I leaned into the discipline I had gained as a caretaker. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by the memory of that rainy night in the mud. I became a ghost. I blocked Arthur on every social media platform. I changed my phone number and instructed the family lawyer, the only person who knew where I was, to keep my progress strictly confidential. By the end of the second year, the silent grind began to pay off in ways Arthur couldn't comprehend. My firm was thriving. I wasn't just managing other people's wealth, I was acquiring my own. I bought my first property, a sleek modern condo that overlooked the city, and I did it all without a single penny from the family estate. I spent my weekends studying the very legal loopholes Arthur thought he was using to secure the inheritance. I watched from afar as Arthur's lifestyle began to crumble. He was a golden child who had never been taught how to build, only how to spend. Through public records, I saw the liens being placed on the family properties. I saw the failed business ventures and the mounting debt. I waited until the moment was perfect. I didn't just want to be successful. I wanted to be the person who held the keys to his survival when he finally hit rock bottom. I watched from afar as Arthur's lifestyle began to crumble. He was a golden child who had never been taught how to build, only how to spend. Through public records, I saw the liens being placed on the family properties. I saw the failed business ventures and the mounting debt. I waited until the moment was perfect. I didn't just want to be successful. I wanted to be the person who held the keys to his survival when he finally hit rock bottom. I spent 3 years transforming from the scapegoat into a woman of immense quiet power. I had acquired the wealth, the status, and the specialized legal knowledge to protect myself. I was no longer the girl who could be locked out in a storm. I was the one who controlled the climate. And as the date for the final estate settlement approached, I knew it was time to stop hiding. It was time to return to the garden, not as a victim, but as the architect of Arthur's undoing. The collision didn't happen in a dark alley or a lawyer's office. It happened exactly where Arthur felt most powerful, the family estate. 3 years after I drove away in the rain, Arthur finally reached out. He didn't call to apologize or to ask how I was. He sent a formal cold invitation to a memorial estate settlement. He needed me there. Not because he missed me, but because the family lawyer had made it clear that the final distribution of assets required both surviving children to be present to sign off on the transition. I arrived an hour early, but I didn't enter through the front door. I parked my car, a vehicle that cost more than Arthur's current net worth, at the edge of the property and walked the perimeter. I saw the peeling paint on the gazebo and the overgrown weeds in the stone paths. Arthur had been living like a king on a mountain of sand, and the mountain was finally washing away. When I finally walked into the garden where the 50 relatives were gathered, the air shifted. I wasn't wearing the thrift store clothes I'd left in. I was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that screamed quiet authority. Arthur spotted me from the podium. He didn't see a successful woman. He saw the same unstable girl he had bullied his entire life. He hurried over, his face flushed with the kind of false bravado only a desperate man can maintain. "Lillian," he hissed, grabbing my elbow and pulling me toward the shadows of the hedges. You actually showed up. Look, I'll make this quick. I know you're probably struggling in the city, probably living in some basement. I'm going to be generous today. Just stand there, look sad, and when I present the documents, you sign them. If you don't make a scene about the unfairness of the inheritance, I'll cut you a check for $5,000 tonight. It's more than you've seen in years, right? I looked at his hand on my arm, then back at his eyes. I didn't pull away. I just smiled. A small, terrifyingly calm smile. 5,000, Arthur? That's very specific. It's a lifeline, Lillian. Take it or leave it, he snapped, adjusting his tie. I'm about to settle this once and for all in front of everyone. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to fight me. I have the papers. I have the support of the family. You have nothing. He turned and marched back to the podium, leaving me standing in the shade. He was so blinded by his own narrative of the golden child and the scapegoat that he couldn't see the trap he had walked into. He thought he was the hunter, but he was the one standing in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by a forest he no longer owned. I watched him tap the microphone. I watched our aunts and uncles settle into their folding chairs, their faces filled with the same judgment they had leveled at me for 28 years. Arthur cleared his throat, held up a thick manila envelope, and began his speech about merit, legacy, and the burden of leadership. He was entirely unaware that while he had been planning this public humiliation, I had been working with the bank to purchase the defaulted notes on this very estate. He was unaware that the forged document in his hand was about to be his undoing. He was playing a game of checkers, and I had already bought the board, the table, and the room we were sitting in. The collision was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was going to be crushed by the impact. Arthur stands at the podium, his voice booming with a false sense of gravitas as he addresses the 50 relatives gathered in the garden. Family, he begins, spreading his arms wide. Today we close a chapter. Our father was a man of tradition, and he understood that a legacy as grand as this estate requires a steady, capable hand. It is my somber duty to reveal the true final wishes he entrusted to me. He holds up the manila envelope, pulling out a crisp, official-looking document. This is the true will signed and witnessed in his final weeks, naming me as the sole executor and primary heir of the estate and all liquid assets. A murmur of approval ripples through the crowd. I see my aunts nodding, their eyes darting to me with pitying glances. Arthur catches my eye and winks, a tiny, sharp gesture of triumph. He thinks he's won. He thinks the scapegoat has finally been silenced. You really should have checked the private vault, Arthur, I say, my voice cutting through his performance like a physical weight. I walk toward the podium, the click of my heels on the stone path the only sound in the garden. Arthur's face goes from smug to a sickly shade of ashen. Lillian, sit down. You're making a scene, he hisses, but the microphone picks it up. I'm not making a scene, Arthur. I'm making a correction, I reply, reaching into my jacket and pulling out a notarized blue folder. The document you're holding is a forgery, created by a notary who was disbarred 3 months ago for fraud. The same notary you met with on a rainy Tuesday while I was sitting by Dad's bedside. The relatives gasp. I don't stop. I open the folder and turn it toward the front row. This is the original notarized will, signed and witnessed while Arthur was away on a weekend bender. It doesn't name a sole heir. It places the entire estate into a trust. I look Arthur directly in the eyes. But here's the part you didn't anticipate. I am the sole trustee. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I have executed the incompetency clause, Dad included. Because while you were busy playing king, I was documenting every cent of the family money you embezzled to cover your failed startups. I have the bank records, the wire transfers, and the video of you neglecting Dad when he was too weak to ask for water. I turned to the relatives, my voice steady and cold. Arthur didn't lose the inheritance because of a mistake. He lost it because he treated our father like a bank and this family like an audience. This estate is now under my control, and the first thing I am doing as trustee is settling the debts Arthur racked up, starting with the eviction of the man standing at this podium. The silence that follows is absolute. The golden child is revealed as a fraud in the very place he sought to destroy me. I watch as our aunts turn their backs on him, their allegiance shifting to the person who actually holds the power. Arthur's social standing vanishes in an instant, leaving him standing alone at a podium that no longer belongs to him. The climax I teased at the very beginning of this story is fulfilled, and the devastation is complete. The garden, once a stage for my public execution, has turned into a scene of absolute ruin for my brother. As the crowd begins to disperse, some relatives scurrying away in embarrassment, others lingering to see if they can curry favor with the new trustee, Arthur finally moves. He stumbles off the podium, the true will he was so proud of now just a crumpled piece of paper in his shaking hand. He reaches for my arm, but I step back, not out of fear but out of a profound lack of interest in his touch. "Lillian, please," he croaks, his voice stripped of all its former booming authority. "I was desperate. The business, the people I owe money to, they aren't like us. I didn't have a choice. We're blood. You can't just throw your only brother out onto the street. Think of what Dad would say." I look at him, and for the first time in 28 years, I don't feel the familiar sting of the scapegoat seeking approval. I don't feel the need to explain myself or defend my actions. I simply see a man who spent his life burning bridges while assuming I would always be there to provide the water. "Dad did speak, Arthur," I say, my voice calm and final. "He spoke through the trust. He knew exactly who you were, and he knew exactly what I was capable of. He didn't leave this to me because I was the good daughter. He left it to me because he knew I was the only one strong enough to protect the legacy from you. We're family," he screams, a last-ditch effort to weaponize a bond he never respected. "No," I reply, looking around at the empty garden and the fading legacy of a toxic hierarchy. "We were a dynamic. We were a system of roles that you benefited from. But I've resigned from my position. I'm not your scapegoat anymore, and you're no longer the golden child. You're just a man who has to face the consequences of his own choices." I walk away from him toward the house that is now legally and rightfully mine, but I don't plan on staying. I've built a life in the city with people who chose me, a chosen family that doesn't require me to diminish myself to make them feel tall. To everyone watching this, I know there are many of you sitting in your cars or in your rooms, or at your own family dinners feeling like the outsider. You are told you are difficult or unstable, simply because you refuse to play the role assigned to you by people who want to use you. I want to validate your struggle right now. The pain of being the scapegoat is real, but so is the power of walking away. You don't owe your life, your success, or your peace to people who only value you for what they can take. You have the right to build your own empire in the silence, just like I did. You have the right to be the victor of your own story. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to set a boundary that felt like an explosion, please share your story in the comments. Let's show each other that we aren't alone in this. Hit that subscribe button to join our community of survivors and builders. Thank you for watching Lillian's journey from the reign to the throne. I'll see you in the next story.